She says, I ride about 150 to 250 miles a week, usually shorter 15 to 30 mile rides on weekdays with longer rides on weekends. Lately, I've been trying to make more time for 110 to 135 mile rides of about 6 to 10,000 feet of climbing. That's really long. Those are big days.
Those are huge days.
Yeah. And I'm on the road for 10 to 12 hours during these rides. So she's taking this pace. She's not like going crazy race pace with this stuff. She's just putting in time, right? She says, I really try to eat a lot of food during these rides, which kudos to you, Felicity. She says, I stop at least once on this ride and eat some solid savory food like a veggie sandwich or burrito, but I'm mostly fueling myself with things like Goo Chews, energy power bars, and carb and electrolyte drink. Eating a lot, and she mentions in parentheses here, more than I used to eat on long rides, has made me feel way better, and I feel super strong during the rides. But each time I do one of these extra long, about 200 kilometer rides, my stomach feels a little nasty and I feel slightly nauseous the day after. Is there something I should be doing or eating more or less of on the day of the ride to help avoid this? So first things first, we should probably mention this awesome blog post that we have. It's called Long Solo Rides and Tips for Epic Days in the Saddle. It's a fantastic post where you can get lots of stuff from it. And Jesse, one of our awesome copywriters, put that together. There's tips from Amber about what she liked to do on long rides because, oh, heaven knows, Amber's had a lot of long rides in her career. Yeah. But Amber, what would you say to this one? Do we want to talk about big rides first and then go into nutrition, or how do you want to handle it?
So I'm curious because I'm curious about what kind of racing you're doing. Those are really long rides. Those are really, really big rides. And I'll just share, I mean, racing a full World Cup World Tour schedule, I almost never did rides that long in my training. So I'm curious if you're training for really, really big events that are really, maybe ultra distance events where that might be necessary. But even then, you don't necessarily need to be doing that kind of mileage every weekend. And I don't know. So I just want to say this for the sake of other people who are listening. I don't want to question, what you're doing, but I think that even if you're training for a really big, long event like that, a jump from 15 to 30 mile rides to up to like a 200K ride on the weekend, that's a really big jump. And it's not going to be that kind of distance is really only helpful for a very small subset of types of events. Even when I was training for a 200 mile gravel race, I trained mostly between 2 and 4 hour rides until there was a gradual build up closer to the event. And so the event day was looking at 11 to 12 hours in the saddle. And the longest ride I ever did was 10 hours. And I did a really gradual build up from 4 to 6 to 8 to 10. And I only did a handful of rides that were between 8 and 10 hours long. And so those big rides, they will leave you feeling nasty almost no matter what. And there's so much that your physiology needs to adapt to that you really need to build up to those distances over time. And that might be a big part of it. It might be less to do with what you're eating and whether or not you've built up to that distance gradually enough to allow your physiology to really catch up and adapt. I don't know. I see Pete nodding, so I want to hear what you're thinking, Pete.
Yeah, this is pretty funny. So I went to Moab this last weekend to ride some mountain bikes, and a couple of my teammates were doing a gravel race called Colorado to Utah. It might be like CO to UT, and it was 190 miles, I think. And since I was only an hour and a half away, I swung by to say hi. But we had a beer and had some dinner, but they were all kind of laying out their nutrition or gathering their nutrition the night before. And so it's really funny, Felicity, we kind of tackled all these questions in one go with three of us standing around.
Should have recorded it, Pete.
I know. I thought, and actually Connor said, "Are you going to record this for the podcast?" And I said, haha. And here I am. So Connor, you won this round. So one of the kind of the three things I was trying to get into their head is that it's really about intensity and duration, and then making sure the foods play nicely with your body. And there's a kind of a perfection, and then what you're actually going to be able to do. Right. So when you have three facets, like kind of all vying for attention with this kind of long ride scenario, I think it's really important to consider intensity right at the beginning, because intensity just makes your GI system not work as well. There's not enough blood. There's not enough energy. There's everything that requires your stomach to really work. You've taken away from it. So if you are kind of on the lower intensity end of the spectrum, you kind of have more freedom to play with your food. But again, it's still how nicely do the multiple foods you're eating at the beginning play together. So for some people, they can eat a Cliff Bar and blocks and electrolyte drink all at once. And some people's stomach really don't agree with that. And again, it's practice and kind of figuring out what your body likes and what it's able to do. But generally speaking, you can kind of go more solid food at the beginning when the intensity is a little lower, and always erring on the side of focusing more on kind of more well-balanced meals, I guess I would call it, at the beginning, while your stomach's still capable, because kind of as you get a few hours in, your stomach starts not functioning at the same capacity. So one of the things that I was thinking for Felicity is make sure you're stopping for that sandwich or burrito kind of early. Like I would say only 2 or 3 or 4 hours into the ride, because you're never going to feel great even after. If you're riding for 10 hours, unfortunately, you're not going to feel great the next day.
No.
And forcing your it's like handcuffing your stomach and then putting a bunch of things that it's not really dialed to eat for 10 hours. But I do think you can fix some of the nausea and like the overall feeling of uneasiness by paying attention to timing your food correctly with intensity. So more well-balanced meals early on with lower intensity, and then you kind of lean into the more carbohydrate-rich, easier to stomach foods at the end of the ride. But again, try to pay attention to how specifically you feel, whether you're eating goo chews or electrolyte mix or a carb-heavy like Martin. Something's just going to feel better with your body, and then you can kind of lean on that later in the ride, and you'll end up feeling better by the end of the ride and better the next day. But if you're just riding for 10 hours, it's a lot of calories to make your stomach go through to make this happen. One of the things I was telling the guys when they were getting ready, actually, they did pretty well. I should give them a shout out. I think everybody got in the top 10. I think they got 3rd, 4th, 6th, and 8th or something. But for a bunch of crit racers, not so bad for a 10-hour gravel race. But I had them kind of pull out each hour of what the race would be like. So they had eight-ish hours of food. And we broke down the first couple hours as the race was probably going to be fast, and you're probably going to be able to eat less, even though you want to be able to kind of put the more macro-heavy food at the beginning. So I said lean heavily on breakfast, and everybody should eat a way bigger breakfast than they think they should, because you probably won't eat for the first 2 hours of this race while it's kind of shaking down. And then they could like lean in. And so they had it all broken down. So they had hour 2, 3, 4, where they knew what they could stomach. There's a lot of fruit ropes, like fruit leathers, things like that, where there was something easier to eat, but still calorie dense. And then we did measure out the carbs because it just makes sense. If you give someone the option to eat 100 grams of carbs an hour because you're on a 10-hour ride, you're going to feel so much better the whole time. And so that way they had, here's 4 things to eat during hour 3 to 4. And you know if you don't eat all 4 of them, you're under fueling. Mm-hmm. You're going to feel worse later on. So I think that having kind of check boxes where I'm going to try to eat all of this food from 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, and you try to do the best you can, and then you can kind of taper off a little bit more. So by the end of the ride, you're actually not putting a bunch in your. You're putting less because you've fueled properly the whole way, and that will also give your stomach a little bit of a break for the 10 hours of the riding.
Nate, I have some thoughts on this, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
I disagree with what Pete says. Entirely. Okay. So on the longer rides, what I find is that at the beginning, you can do a lot of gels and stuff, and it's not so bad, but you get palate fatigue. And that is when I crave, this is not a race, right? And this kind of thing. That's when I crave that solid food. And if it's a 10 or 12 hour, totally do the solid food. But I would not do things like a veggie sandwich. To me, that's a recipe for slow digesting food that's going to be in there. Have you guys ever had like food poisoning and you throw up vegetables like from like 14 hours before or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, how is that still in there? Like, I ate that such a long time ago. Just trust me on this. That's what happens. And but I wouldn't do a burrito either.
Don't
That's
ask for
also
more
high
detail.
fiber. Yeah. Anything high fiber, I would stay away from. And what you're craving is probably fat, and for the savory, fat, probably some protein and carbohydrates. So things like potato chips, French fries. I would even do like little McDonald's hamburgers without the cheese, stuff like that. That's because that's that palate fatigue with savory that you want, and you want a lot of calories. And then as you're getting lighter, you're in a caloric deficit, right? Or not, you're in a carb deficit as you're going through this whole race. I highly doubt you're going to be on top of it the whole time with nutrition. So even as you're getting further and further into it at the end, you got to keep up still eating in order for recovery for the after that ride. Like you may be able to finish without it, but you'll just feel a lot better if you keep doing it. So I wouldn't, even if you said, hey, I only have an hour left, I can make it home. On a 10, 12-hour ride, just keep going, because it's going to this is going to be like another like 12-hour process that's going to go through in order to recover from this. And you'll probably absorb it a little bit better too as you're riding. I think those are the main things. Burritos. I don't like the burritos because of the beans in it. People can have tough digesting that. And I guess if you did it with white rice, meat, and salsa too, that can be hard. Anything spicy. And so one thing that gets you is anything acidic. That's another reason why I say something like a McDonald's hamburger or something with tomatoes, or like think about drinking orange juice like 6 hours into your ride. Oh. That's really, but tomatoes are kind of like that, right? With
my
salsa.
throat just caught on fire. Yeah.
I know. I wouldn't do any of that. So that's another one, of peanut butter and like a peanut butter and honey sandwich or something. That's a great one with white bread. That's savory, easy to digest, has some fat in it, portable. You can carry it around.
Rice cakes.
Yeah.
So this is Felicity. First of all, you're very brave. I would never eat like a burrito or a veggie sandwich mid-ride because I would be terrified of what my gut would do to me thereafter. This is why I almost force myself to just take in my carbs through drink mix and gels, and that's it. Because I view it from a risk perspective. What's the risk of taking in something that isn't so concentrated, that isn't just on the carb spectrum, doesn't have anything else? If I take in a burrito, there's countless things that could go wrong with my stomach thereafter. And then that could make it so that I get a really bad night's sleep. And then that makes it so that the next workout isn't very good. And then it cascades. So for me, I look at this like, I want to put the most concentrated thing possible in terms of what I can take in for carbohydrate into my bottles or my gel, that sort of thing. Or in other words, like the most focused, the least variety. When I'm off the bike, give me as much variety as I can possibly have. When I'm on the bike, keep it as simple as possible. Fast burning carbs, and I want to train my body to be able to take that in. I've seen this situation where a lot of athletes say, you do that long ride, you stopped, you had a burrito, and then you keep riding and you're like, oh, my stomach hurts. And some experienced person on the ride is going to be like, it's all those gels, they'll give you gut rot. And it's like, hey, you also just put a giant burrito in your stomach. So like, it's not just the gels. You can get used to anything more or less. It's impressive what your body can tolerate. But if you can get to the point where you're just taking in like race gas, so to speak, like just that stuff that really focuses on making you faster, I think there's a huge benefit to it. Because it's pretty easy to take in a lot of calories through a bottle when you have like a high concentrated mix, like 90 grams per hour of like glucose and fructose. And with gels, you can get in quite a lot of calories with that. It's portable. It's something that you can have on race day. It's something that you know that it's giving you what you actually need on the bike, which is at that point, it's really the sugar that you need, the fast burning sugar. So I not all food is created equal in terms of energy availability on a bike, and not all carbohydrates are even created equal in terms of energy availability on the bike. So it's really a decision of what do you want to do? Are you trying to do these rides and train your body for race day? Mm-hmm. If so, then you should eat like race day. If not, then, and if it's for the social experience of being able to stop mid-ride, then it's just knowing what you're going to be dealing with. And then making sure that you aren't, piling on more complexity on top of whatever you're eating mid-ride.
Yeah.
So that's and people think I'm weird because I just drink all of my calories and maybe take in a few gels, but I'm like, it seems weird not to do that because this is just like so like it fail proof in air quotes here. In other words, it's like so there's just a lot less risk with it.
Yeah. One thing to think about in terms of, we talk about upset GI systems or digestion as kind of like a whole, but there's a couple of different components that are affected by your exercise. One is gastric emptying. So if you think about your stomach, it works almost like a colander. So when you take in fluid and solids, the solids are going to sit and the fluids are going to flow out of your stomach pretty easily or more easily and quicker than will the solids. And so the solids having some gummy bears, right, those are going to sit not quite as long in that colander as would, say, a sandwich, right? So, and the solid piece that's in the colander is what's called a bolus, and that's the difference. Like when you actually chew some solid food and you swallow a bolus, and then that sits in the stomach. So the length of time that the bolus stays in your stomach depends on what it's made of. And so, like Nate was saying, fiber is slow to digest. So there are certain things that are going to sit longer in your stomach. But then the second half of this process is all happening in your gut, right? So in your intestines. And this goes back to what Pete was saying about how the intensity of the exercise is really going to affect this too. Because when you exercise at really high intensity, say at race pace, which is going to be hard to do over these really, really long distances. But if you're racing a 200-mile gravel race, that's definitely happening this summer. So a lot of people are going to be doing this. You're going to be racing at very, very high intensity over the course of that 200 miles. And one of the things that happens at high intensity is it affects the degree to which your intestines can actually move food through the intestinal tract. So when you swallow, you're using musculature that does what's called peristalsis. So it's kind of squeezing the food along so that it can move through the tube of your esophagus. And the same thing happens in your intestines. And that peristaltic motion can be affected and either become weaker or actually disengage for temporarily when you're really putting out a huge, huge effort. So there's kind of two ways that you can feel that discomfort. One is at that stage in your stomach, and then you can also have that shift in how well things are moving through and absorbing in your intestines as well. And both of those things can either make or break a day for sure.
Ain't that the truth?
So figuring out what works for you, depending. So again, context, what works for your body under normal circumstances, how intense are you actually, what level of intensity are you hitting on these rides? At what point in the rides are you hitting intensity? Can you shift around the types of fuel that you're taking in based on that intensity? And then carry those lessons over from the shorter rides that you're doing, the stuff that sits well, the stuff that is easy to get down. And keeping in mind, maybe some points you might want to stick with fluid calories because it's going to come through that colander really fast versus other times when you're going to really need something solid in your stomach to feel satiated, especially in some of these longer rides too. So unfortunately, it's going to be a little bit of trial and error, but I think a really important thing to keep in mind is your body needs time to adapt. So if you're going to try something new, you're going to need to give it some time before you know if it really works for you. It's a little bit frustrating, but once you do figure it out, it'll be really, really worth it.
I want to add one disclaimer.
Please go.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, actually, Amber hit on the last thing that I wanted to talk about is there's different types of discomfort. And so paying attention to that, whether it's gut discomfort or you feel like everything's not moving through you at a correct pace is super important.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is I totally agree with John and Nate. I think if you're feeling like your performance is being limited in any way by your calorie intake, it's much more important to focus on the intake itself. If you're debilitated by nausea and the way you're feeling the next day, then I would swing back over and start thinking about things not necessarily from the fueling perspective and try to figure out what the discomfort is. Like you have to figure out the problem first before piling more on top. It's two different approaches, and a lot of people find something that works really well for them, like John, and can just do it forever, and it's totally fine. But it takes a lot of people a long time to figure out what jives in their system. And one of the things you can do is you can do a 6-hour ride, and you can figure out kind of just as much, and then you don't feel quite as badly.
Yes.
after all, day after day after day, weekend after weekend. So try some things during a 5 or 6 hour ride instead of during your 10 or 12 hour ride, and you'll be able to get that kind of iteration will happen faster, and you can make better decisions without kind of laying it all out there and being like, well, that didn't work at all, and I feel 10 times worse than I did last Saturday.
Yeah.
So yeah, play with everything and pay attention to how you're feeling, and do it during slightly smaller rides, and you'll get there for sure.
Yeah.
Nate, did you have anything else to add?
Just that, Felicity, it's really like if you're racing that distance. So if you're racing that distance, I really like the idea of trying to go John's aspect. And that's what I do too, is just pure liquid on racing, because it's very convenient and it's nice. But if you're not racing, it's just for fun. I know it's a lot cheaper, and it's also like less, it's just more fun to eat like food during it. I remember the first time I did one of my first rides, I did the Carson Loop here, which is like a 56-mile loop. And I stopped in Carson City and had a whole pizza. It was like, it was so hard.
I love that.
That's awesome.
And it was fine. And you know what it is? If I could not do that today or any time in my career, while I was racing, if I was
illustrious.
no, exactly. In my free time of riding a bike, if the intensity was high, no way. But if the intensity is low and you can talk the whole time and stuff, I could totally eat a pizza. I could, stop for 30 minutes, eat a pizza, get back on the bike and go. And I think we've all experienced this on like coffee shop rides where you stop, you eat a bunch of food, then you get going with your friends. You drink even like coffee, which is very acidic and can be hard on the stomach, and you're just okay. And it's just as everyone says, we're beating a dead horse here, but it's the intensity, the purpose, what your performance is, and all of that. But I remember, Leadville, even Ironmans, you actually don't really want to eat that night very much and the next day, because you're so messed up. And it might have nothing to do with what you're eating, Felicity, and just how deep you're going on these long rides. If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.